Making your way through work Monday takes everything you got. Then Monday night rolls around and you realize there's a shot. You're only 10 points away. All those times when your team had no fight, they're just so gosh darn frail. Then your star quarterback let another deep ball sail, and your third round pick bet on his team. Then go check out our streets where everybody knows your pain, and they listen to complaints. You wanna be where you can see our bodies bring you no shame. You wanna go where everybody knows your pain.
Welcome back to Dad Bod Fantasy Squad. I am here. Am I freezing, Robbie, or are you freezing?
Looks like I'm freezing.
No. Oh, there you are. There you are. I am here joined with Robbie Bobby. What's up, dude?
What's going on, Mario?
Not much. Not much. I am currently drafting as we speak. There was recently we were shouted out on a local podcast from my hometown, Lorain, Ohio, called It's On Us. And go check them out, by the way. I think they post a podcast once weekly. But I got into their league. They're not a fantasy football podcast, but I got into their podcast league. I think it's one of their first kind of intro to fantasy football for some, but a couple of them have played before. So I'm excited, drafting right now as we're talking and kind of stumbling over my words here.
What pick you got?
I have 7, and it's a 10-teamer.
Okay.
And
a lot of good value.
Justin Jefferson's still there. It's 5 right now. Get him again, dude. I've been scooping him up. Oh, here we go. Let's see. And he is available. Austin Eckler went. Jamar Chase went. I'm gonna do it again, baby.
Yeah,
Justin
you
Jefferson,
have to.
come on home.
You have to.
We do have a fun and amazing show. I'm excited for it today. Jay Stein from Dynasty Nerds is going to be joining us to go over his, I call it a PE tool. I don't know what he has for a name for it. So, Robbie, why don't we just bring him on?
Bring on, dude.
Everyone, welcome Jay Stein from Dynasty Nerds to the show. What's up, man?
Hey, what's up? Jay, how you doing?
Doing good. I was just telling Robbie I'm mid-draft here. There was a draft that came up. We got asked, me and a friend got asked to join probably early today. And they're like 9 o'clock. I was like, all right, let's do it. How you been, man? You're muted, I think, or it's like not coming out.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I'm doing good. It's really nice to, be on the pod, guys. It was fun meeting you in Canton. Rob, I appreciate the beer. It was awesome.
Anytime, buddy.
There you go, man. There you go. Yeah, it's really good to meet you guys. I'm excited to join the show and, talk about the PE.
Yeah, dude. So like one of my favorite things when I first met you, I'm sorry, because the ESPN do just played in my ear. When I first met you, though, dude, I didn't even recognize you because I think primarily our interactions have come mostly from just straight messages and like DMs on Twitter, right? And we'll go DeAndre Swift. And so when I would see your face, it would be when I would be on Dynasty Nerds where there's no beard. And then you come up and you're like, hi, Mario. And I'm like, and you're like, it's Jay. I'm like, oh, shoot, look at the beard. But yeah, so I was shocked to see you, man. I was excited. I was glad we got to chat up for a while. And it was Expo was really fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was a great time. I'm fairly new to the space. So, just kind of meeting some of the people I was working with at Dynasty Nerds was just a great time to just kind of interact with them and meet them, and got to meet the guy that edits most of my work, and just connect with people one on one, face to face. Sort of people that you become friends with on Twitter, and in the fantasy football space, you might not necessarily know them very well, and then you get to meet them in person and share stories like undergraduate at Ohio State stories and stuff like that. So
Yeah, exactly, dude. Like that was the best part. You graduated what, 08? Was it? Did I remember that correctly?
yeah, I'm a undergrad 08 grad.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's always funny because it's like a small world, right? Like, I want to say somebody shouted you out on Twitter, and I just saw it, and like I thought it was really interesting. And this was kind of also when we were just getting on Twitter a little bit, like early on. I was like, Dublin, Ohio, no way. And it's just there's more people in Ohio than I realize now, but like I thought it was really cool, and then I read, and it was awesome. What's up, Travis? Travis was another one that we ran into at the expo. Great dude. Loved meeting up with him, man. It's cool. Like I got to meet some of my favorite people that I've been interacting with on Twitter. So like it's been awesome. And I'm glad that you're on the show with us today, and especially to go over I keep calling it a PE tool, but I don't know what you call it necessarily.
Yeah, I mean that's what I call it pretty much. But I mean, the whole premise is, I write this series over at Dynasty Nerds called The Intelligent Fantasy Football Investor, and it's about valuation, and kind of bringing some like investment concepts over into fantasy football. So that's kind of the gist of it. But one of the things that I learned to do in investing was the PE ratio, and so that's sort of the tool that you're referring to that I've kind of brought over into fantasy football world.
Yeah. And it is interesting. It is like nothing I've ever seen. Now we're going to a space where there's like stock markets for players. So like I think it's like
I love it.
timing for it to be coming out. Yeah, I do too. And I actually, now that you like think about it, like there's even more analysis that you could probably do on some of these stock prices that I'm sure you've already been considering, knowing your financial background.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean I've seen some really cool, interesting stuff out there. Yes, I've seen Mojo. Have you heard of this?
Yes, Mojo.
I think
it's Prediction Strike is the other.
I was just gonna say
Yeah, Prediction
Prediction
Strike,
Strike's a big one. It's come. I mean, from what I've seen, that's getting pretty popular. I actually have one downloaded on my phone that I'm gonna look it up.
Can't do any in Ohio, Rob.
No, that's the thing. Like I can't. I'm waiting to
year.
do it, but I watch them to see what's going on.
Yeah,
It's a cool idea. It really is.
Oh yeah,
It makes sense.
it is. Well, before we hop in, and Jay, while you're here, we're gonna hit some news, and then we'll dive right into your tool. But let's go over some quick news and we'll kind of run through these because it's like there's a lot of news, but nothing's like super crazy. So, Harbaugh claims Kenyon Drake signing is not a sign of J.K. Dobbins not being ready. Kind of wordy. Sorry about that. Anything to take from here? Or are we just like whatever? It is what it is.
I'm nervous personally. I'm nervous about that backfield. Gus Edwards, what is he on the pup? So he's going to miss the first 4 weeks.
Yes, he is.
I believe so.
Yes.
And yeah, I've been saying it all off season. It did not sound like just a regular ACL tear for Dobbins. There were some MCL issues. So that usually takes a little bit longer than just a regular 8-month recovery. So, yeah, I'm nervous for JK. I wouldn't touch him at his ADP.
Yeah. So
go ahead, Jay.
Sorry. My comment on that is coming from a dynasty perspective. There's no other running back I'd want on the Ravens right now other than J.K. Dobbins.
100%.
So, if you're thinking about redraft and what you're thinking about this year, sure. More than me on the injury and how long it takes to get back. But J.K. Dobbins is a good running back. And if we're thinking about this from a dynasty perspective, as somebody, when you think about ceilings and floors, this guy could be something good. And right now you can get him at a discount. Now that has nothing to do with, this year and you're performing this year, but that's how I would think about the J.K. Dobbins.
I I love what you did there and
Mhm.
taking it in a dynasty perspective, because that is really what you focus on and what this tool that we're going to be talking about focuses on a lot. I'll ask you some redraft questions, but no, I love that sort of take because I am curious, and we'll talk about it here shortly. I am curious if his
Yeah.
price is one of those like buy low candidates. Does it
It
price
is-
out right?
It is interesting, Mario, right? Because a lot of the time we go through the news, and when you're going through this
Only
stuff,
redraft.
in your
Yeah.
head, it's instant. Okay, what's this? It mean right now? What are you doing for me right now? So
Yeah.
that is a different perspective. That 100%. If it is a dynasty, I'm not afraid to take him. I'm all in on him for the next 5-6 years for sure. That offense is going to continue to run with him, and he's going to be a major part of that offense for the next 5-6 years, like I just said. And he is really good when he's healthy. He's a
Yeah.
top talent.
And RB1 there is, and probably will be for a long time, Lamar Jackson. But he's probably the next option there.
Yeah.
I'm going to run through these three very fast. Marlon Mack ends up back on the practice squad for the Texans. Both JJ Taylor and Kevin Harris are back with the Pats practice squad. I did think that was interesting because I think this is kind of a newer thing that they're going to they're holding on to 6 running backs. Essentially, they could bring them up, I think, 3 times throughout the year. Trey Sermon, kind of a surprise cut, happened today.
Yeah.
That to me signals like, okay, Jeff Wilson is RB2. Yeah, no, is it anybody's
Who knows?
RB2? Yeah,
Who
that's a good
knows
point.
in that offense?
Good point.
That's the way you got to play the 49ers offense. It's basically get the cheapest guy, get a
Mhm.
couple of the cheapest guys, and then hope you get a couple weeks of fantasy relevance performance.
And hope you hit.
Yeah,
Hope you pick them the right week.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I'd be kind of trying to do if you're doing those drafts with a huge bench. You take upside shots on some of the cheaper 49ers running backs.
I currently do that
Yeah, and
now in the dynasty we just drafted. Sorry, Rob. I faded the RB position, RB2 for my team, and I have Jeff Wilson waiting on my bench.
And I'll tell you what, man, I love Chase Edmonds, but Miami scares me too. I think it's going to be a similar issue with like who's going to get the rock that week and how many times are they going to touch it? Are they going to mix different guys in every other week? Because it could be very similar to that 49ers offense.
Yeah. So I did want to go through these injuries pretty fast. McCarthy said Gallup looks excellent and has avoided any setbacks.
Mhm.
James Washington placed on IR, will be out first 4 games. I think that's important for Tolbert's value, at least for the beginning half. Maybe it means more. Miles Sanders still not practicing. Supposedly should be good for week 1. Ertz has a calf issue, and I think Cliff said it in the way of we'll see about week 1. It was a very odd answer.
Trey McBride season, baby.
Trey McBride season is right. I see the fantasy whispers in our chat, and I don't know if they're like talking back and forth. I'm confused here. Who's goal line back in Miami? I'll take the upside bet. I don't. Maybe it's coming out of order on my screen, but yes, Sony Michel was cut and I think signed to the Chargers.
Yes, he did sign with the Chargers, which is interesting, right? I think that's noteworthy because he has
not
been
good for Spiller.
He's been a goal line back, right? Yeah. So I mean, it could hurt Eckler's. Is Eckler going to get another 15 touchdowns like he did last season?
It's like one of those things that if you're going, first off, are you projecting for 12 to 15 touchdowns, and then also are you projecting for Sony Michel to take?
That's fair.
Those touchdowns. I think like you shouldn't be projecting that high in general.
I agree with that. I had him definitely TD regression, but it's interesting. I mean, yeah, it's interesting to note. And I don't know. Do you adjust at all Eckler with this signing?
I don't think I adjust him. And this may be just too close to the season to adjust sort of feeling. But hey, Jay, do you think that means anything for Spiller and Dynasty?
Dynasty wise, no, not really.
Nah, so I'm gonna be there 1 year.
yeah, I mean, he was a big part of the Rams run last year. Why Cam Akers was coming back,
Yeah.
then cut from Miami, and now maybe on the Chargers.
I think he is signed to the Chargers, but
he is signed.
Like
Okay.
how? I think so. I
So-
thought that's what I
I think it was
ended
a
up
1
seeing.
year. I think it was a 1 year deal.
Yeah, but they could cut him also next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the way I would look at this is, I'm not like super good at you know, really understanding how running back rooms develop over time. You kind of have to be in the room to see how that goes. So
Yeah.
what I kind of rely on is the experts that, have access to those types of rooms.
Yeah, beat
And
reporters
they
whatnot.
make projections. Like they'll say, the full year 2022 points per game projection for Sony Michel is this. And that's how I would work it into my model. So they might bring Eckler down like half a
smidge.
point per game.
Yeah.
And they might bring Spiller down, maybe a point or two a game. And that's how I would work it through my model. Now that being said, if there's any injuries, I'd be really interested in that third running back. So, in that case, Sony Michel, if at the very bottom of your roster, if you have an injury to Eckler, or you have an injury to Spiller, that's one of those guys that could come in and put up an RB2 performance for you
With
towards
Jay
the end of the
Herbs.
year.
Yeah.
And
I
just
agree.
like he did, it's a perfect setup from last year where he, went over to the Rams and put up a couple of decent weeks there.
Yeah.
And that's the type of thing you can think from him going forward. That's how I would look at it.
Yeah, he's worth rostering. And I mean, I wouldn't take him until, late round, one of your last picks for sure. I'd throw a dart. You never know. Maybe he will get the goal line work. And in an offense that is Howard, he could come down with 6-7 touchdowns. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
No, it's not. It's just not something that you're going to actively kind of project.
Yeah, worth a dart throw.
Yeah. So let's get into this PE tool a little bit more, Jay. So before we do, I kind of wanted to introduce, to who maybe who's watching or listening that hasn't got a chance to see any of your work. We can find you at Dynasty Nerds, right? That's where all your articles are posted up at, correct?
Yeah.
And currently, is it only articles? Is it podcasts? Is there any other content we should be on the lookout there?
It's funny you should say that. So I am working on maybe a video series here coming soon.
Nice.
But I also do Devi work too. So I kind of cross over between like analytics and analysis for the Devi world. And so I'm running like, top 5 Devi players for each of the positions, mock drafting. And I did the Big 12 preview this year for the Dynasty Nerds Devi team. So, got some of that stuff. And then, potentially, a video series related to Dynasty Nerds on this topic. And we'll see if that comes about. But, got a couple irons in the fire in terms of, doing a couple of different things. The other thing I'm working on is potentially putting this PE up on a website. Making it a tool that people can come and use instead of just sort of relying on the series and what I'm spewing out. Make it something that people could come and actually click around in and use.
Yeah, and okay, so let's kind of go a little bit further there. So a lot of this tool kind of has, and correct me if I'm wrong on saying any of this, like it uses keep trade cut as like the background of its value, right? Like that's kind of the source of value. How does this differ from keep trade cut on when people are looking at it or when you're presenting the information?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say to that is price and value are not the same thing. That's a big part of the series. Price is what you pay for something, and value is what you get from that. So when I use price, I'm using the price of keep, trade, cut. I think price is very sort of self-explanatory. It's what you pay in a trade for a player. It's where you draft them, or what I use is just the number assigned to them on keep, trade, cut. So the PE that I'm doing, PE in investing is price to earnings. And it's basically you taking the price of a stock divided by its earnings per share. And then you compare that to a similar company. And the lower the PE, the more value you're getting. So the more earnings per increment dollar of share price you're getting. And so basically you just took that tool and applied it to fantasy football. And price in that case is the KTC. And earnings is a player's points per game. So we're just taking price KTC divided by a player's points per game, and you get a PE. And then you can take that PE and compare it to a similar player, like for like player. And the lower the PE versus the other player, that's the one that's more. You're getting more value. You're getting more points per unit of KTC. And so that's the gist of it, basically.
Yeah. So let's take this back here for a second. When during COVID, we saw some of these big tech companies jump to enormous PEs. Help me out a little bit on this, Jay. Apple was probably something in the 60s or 70s at one point in middle of COVID. Like the S&P 500. I think the average PE, not that this necessarily matters, but just to try to give a grasp for the listeners, is about, I want to say the average is supposed to be around what, 15 to 20?
Yeah. So for the stock market,
Yeah.
The PE varies. I mean, I think 15, 16 is kind of where it generally has been over time. But that's for the stock market. This is just for players. So
Yeah, I know, because like even when I was bringing that back, I was like, well, the players though don't really like. Is there an average that we see for a player though? Like, is it? Because I remember when you sent this to me, and like it seemed like high was like 45, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so it all really depends on sort of what type of player there is. If the player is young, has a lot of potential upside, and produces really strongly, then obviously it should trade at a higher multiple, a higher PE than a player that's maybe older, where the points per game is kind of peaked or maybe declining, and less upside. And so really, the most important thing with PEs is comparing apples to apples. So you need to look at players that are of a similar thing. And the way that I do that is through clusters. So I like to group them up into small little groups of clusters. And I think, most people have heard of rankings and tiers, but clusters is the next step here. And that's basically, not only are you tiering people up, but you're also, grouping them into the similar ages and similar production levels and similar upside potential. And those are the guys that you would then compare. So you can't really use the PE and compare a quarterback to a wide receiver.
Okay.
You want to look at two similar quarterbacks and two similar wide receivers. It also doesn't provide much value if you're going to, say, look at Justin Jefferson versus Adam Thielen. Those guys are on two different trajectories, and Justin Jefferson should trade at a higher multiple than Adam Thielen. And so when I'm looking and trying to find upside or downside, or which guys are my buys and which guys are my sells, I'm comparing Justin Jefferson to Jamar Chase, not Adam Thielen, when I do that work. And that's how I decide if there's upside or downside in a particular name.
Yeah, and that I'm glad you brought that up, because even when I read these articles, that's a good point. Like, I know Thielen's not even coming close to the same PE as Justin Jefferson, but maybe something like this is going to be, I may be far off here, but like somebody like Justin Fields might have a similar PE to somebody like Tom Brady. But again, when you're looking at those PEs, you might want to look at, what are you looking for? Like, are you playing for the championship in your dynasty this year? Because if so, fine, go for Tom Brady. Or are you looking to have a long-standing QB or what we expect to be long-standing sort of thing, right? Am I hitting that correctly?
Yeah, so Justin Fields has a PE of about 30,
Okay.
and Tom Brady has a PE of about 17. Now, I would
Oh,
argue,
wow.
now that's where you're getting a lot of points from Tom Brady and not a lot of points from Justin Fields. I think consensus points per game for Justin Fields is about 16, and consensus points per game for Brady is about 20. So, and the difference in value, in price, Tom Brady's trading at 3,300 in KTC, and Justin Fields is trading at 4,700.
I mean, I
Almost
suppose it makes
4,800.
sense. He's 40 freaking 5. So of course he
Yeah,
has like that lower, he's not expensive to go out and get.
Mhm.
yeah. So that's why, I would say that, really they're not too comparable. And if I was trying to mock up a trade that I was doing, I would be going by KTC. I would plug it into the calculator and see, what equals out. But when I'm targeting who I want to trade for, I'm looking for guys that, have some appreciation in KTC. So like KTC is the price that I'm getting, but I think that player's KTC should be higher. So I'm getting sort of a value when I make that trade, because there's a difference between the price you pay for something and its fundamental value. And this PE model is basically trying to come up with a fundamental value. And where it differs from a player's KTC price, that's where you can kind of create some extra KTC along the way. Yeah, so that's what we're trying to do there.
It's almost you made that sound perfect. It makes it sound like, okay, here's KTC is our KTC is our currency. We're trying to profit some of this value from KTC. No, I love it. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think it kind of perfectly leads into, let me move some of my stuff around here, your top buys. So we see these in percentages. And I'm going to need your help a little bit again here. When we're looking at these percentages, so Hunter Henry, are you profiting 45% in what we just said, KTC, correct?
Yeah, so what I would say, and Hunter Henry is a great example because his KTC is so low right now. He is at 1,900 KTC, and I think he should get to 2,600. So that equals that, what is it, 45% ish.
Okay.
So those were round numbers, but that's about what I'm saying. So my point is that he's trading at 1,900. He should be trading at 2,600 or 2,700 ish. So that's the 45% upside that I'm projecting.
According
sorry.
to Keep Trade Cuts model.
Yeah. So according to Keep Trade Cuts pricing. Yeah. So basically what we're trying to do is get appreciation on Keep Trade Cut, collect as much KTC as possible.
And the value looks at, remind everyone, the value looks at points per game, projected points per game, right? From your clusters.
Yeah. So when I first wrote the series, I was going off of 2021 actual numbers.
Okay.
So actual 2021 points per game. And then about halfway through, once we started getting a sort of a consensus of what 2022 projections were, then I switched over to 2022 projections. And, that's tough. I think a lot of people would look at that and they're like, I want to go off of what they actually did before, give me some like actual points that they scored during a game. But then, when you think about how stocks trade on the stock market, when a company releases earnings, the majority of the time they spend talking about what's going to happen in the future, what's going to, project in the future. And that's what this is about. I mean, stocks trade off of are the expectations that you're setting and what you think is going to happen in the future, not necessarily what happened in the past. And so we use in 2022 projections, we use what happened in 2021 to kind of come up with that, and maybe a baseline, and then you figure what happens during free agency, what happens in the draft, who are the new coaches, what the new schemes, and you come up with a projection. And there's a lot of smart people that work on that. But what I do is I use sort of a consensus there in terms of what the projections are. So yeah.
So and that's great. Like this is what we need to look at, and it all sounds so what's the word I'm looking for? It sounds like we're trading money, and we're not. So like when he has his top buy list here, so let's paint a picture a little bit more. If he's saying my top buy, the number one on this list ends up being Hunter Henry, so I'm gonna buy him, and his price according to KTC is about 1,700. I think you just said. So I get him for equivalent of 1,700 is probably a mid third, late third, or something like that. Which again, we're kind of making this generic. I don't know if there's many people that would do that. Depends on how valuable they find that draft pick. But that's where the value is currently showing on KTC is what Hunter Henry is worth. I would, again, correct me at any point I'm wrong here, Jay, but I think it's like a third, maybe a high third.
Yeah, let me look and see real quick. I'm gonna type it in.
I want to say because I think like a mid second goes for about 2,200. I thought
so. He's trading at 3.02, so a high third, an early third.
Okay, so he's saying go buy Hunter Henry for an early third in your dynasty league. You hold on to Hunter Henry, let that value bake. Let it marinate.
Yeah.
Let him start catching some TDs, and we'll see what happens. Let him have what he projects at your point per game, which is probably somewhere around, I would say, maybe I'm getting too crazy with this. 11.
It's 9.
9. Okay.
9.
So if he's getting 9 points a game, and say it's 8 weeks in, his value is expected to go somewhere closer to that full 26 to 27. If he's 9 points a game by week 8, am I hitting this all right?
That's right. That's the gist of it. And that's how a lot of this has worked. Now, the biggest catalyst is games played. So, earnings per game. So the points per game that you're getting. So those will be, each player will get, assuming no injury, 17 chances to, throw up good earnings. So those are decent catalysts. There's other catalysts too, like injuries or, coaching changes or, like becoming a bigger part of the offense or, playing a defense that isn't good at covering the tight end. So that, there's other things out there, but yeah, the main catalyst is going to be playing games and earning
QB
points.
suspension.
QB suspensions, yeah.
Like
so there's lots of catalysts that could happen for each of these games. So far, we haven't played any games, and I've made and closed a lot of buy and sell decisions. I think we're going to throw up a track record here at some point. But the point, the like you said, the point is, once I make a recommendation, I'm waiting for that catalyst or whatever it takes to get him to the price that I think he should be. And then once he's at that price I think he should be or within their range, I'll upgrade it or I'll downgrade him from a buy to a hold and try and find a different buy. Okay. So I'll be back and forth on a player. It's kind of a player agnostic model. And I'm just looking for the values. And then when they get to become about where they should be priced, then I'll pull off the trade. I'll lock that in and then move on to the next trade. And sometimes if I miss on something, I'll close a trade and I'll lock in some of the losses as well. And that happened a couple times already too. And you'll see that in the track record.
I'm okay. So I know exactly what you're talking about now because I was when you sent it to me, I think I sent you a note like we'll talk about this. Not quite sure what this is, but now it makes sense what you're saying. What's great about this, and I know like for anyone listening and watching, this gets complicated, and Jay does a great job of explaining it because it's this is something that he and I have talked about for probably 2 months about getting him on here and having this conversation, because it's a tough conversation. Like for the simple Rob and I minds, right? Like we're just like, maybe I'll
yourself.
speak for myself, Rob. All right. Sorry. I can see your face, but like it is, it's so interesting because pretty much what Jay just told us is he sees no names here. He sees names by association and needs to know what the values are, but he pretty much trades based on certain values that spit out from his PE. Like if he sees that they're a good buy, if he sees that they're a good sell, he doesn't care their name, which is a great trait to have in fantasy football and one that I am so far away from. Hence my love for Javonte Williams and T. Higgins.
Yeah, so that's a good way of putting it. I try not to have favorites. That being said, so it gets into this debate about what's a good player versus a good investment, right? And so many fantasy analysts, their main role is to search and find good players because they think that player will somehow outproduce whatever expectations are because they're good and not everybody understands that. I don't do that. I don't care whether you're a good player or a bad player. All I care is, are you a value? Are you a good investment?
Yep.
And good players can be both good or bad investments at any particular time. Just depends on what their fundamental value is versus the price. Bad players can be both good or bad investments at any given time. So it's just a kind about playing what is the fundamental value versus what the price is at the moment. And it'll be fluid. It'll move back and forward.
Yeah. So that's what that's what my mind is going right now. So like during the season, this moves away from projected total. What is that PPG that you're looking for? Their current one? Is there a certain point in the game or season where you switch it? Help me understand that a little bit more of how in season prices, or not necessarily prices because that's KTC, in season values are shaped.
Yeah, so that is sort of a work in progress.
That's that would be amazing.
A lot of this is relatively new. I think for the first 3 or 4 weeks, it'll be based on season long points per game projections. I think once we get around to week 3 or week 4, we might be some sort of hybrid model, if not fully 2022 actual points per game.
Oh,
okay.
So I might do it both ways and see which one makes more sense, which one fits with the data that's coming from it. But that's sort of, kind of like working through the kinks of, this is a model I brought out in February. And that's where my track record's from. We haven't gone through a full season yet. I did some of this last year, and it wasn't necessarily easy to switch from projected to actual in the model, and I wasn't necessarily getting the best info or data out of it. So I'm going to really try a few different approaches this time and see what the data tells me is the right way to do it. My guess, I've seen some guys talk about this, but after week 3 or week 4, we might have some things, figured out. These players might be in their ranges of where they should be. If you're putting players in clusters, usually it's, age, and then it's sort of a range of points per game. So, you can figure out which tight ends are under 26 and score 11 to 15 points per game by week 3, or week 4, that should be sort of, starting to, put these guys in buckets at that point.
Yeah.
And it might make sense to, switch to actual at that point. I kind of have to see what's going on and make some tweaks on the fly. But yeah, that's kind of what I would think from that perspective.
Yeah. I almost interesting approach to it could, like, I just think, like, when I was doing my projections, I did I want to say it was the last 6 weeks of 2021. I did 2021 as a whole, and I did something else, and I kind of just did the averages of those things and then did my human touch. But like, it is interesting to kind of, I just imagine like these names, like you're like a cool website where it shows like top buys. Here's the top 10 that are like best buys, best buys, best buys.
Yeah.
When we go back to this, like some of the things that interest me is that we have Lamar Jackson here, Justin Fields. Like Justin Fields had a horrific year, so that makes a little bit more sense. The Lamar one is like, is it because he runs? Like he doesn't necessarily get hurt. Lenny Fournette, James Conner, are those like injury risk? Is that why they're such great buys? And is that something that is being predicted in the model? Like,
Well, this is all dynasty, correct?
Yeah,
all
this is all
dynasties.
dynasty. Yeah.
So
Yes.
age plays a big factor, especially
Oh,
running backs.
so if they're because they're older, you're saying it puts them in that higher bucket, especially at, I bet, Lenny and James Conner's age, which makes them a good buy for at least the season.
Yeah. So,
If not further.
so for example, like Lamar Jackson, I got him in a cluster of quarterbacks that are under 30 and they score 20 plus points per game. That's Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, and I think you can probably put Deshaun Watson in there if you wanted to. And last year, Lamar Jackson scored 20 points per game. This year, he's expected to score about 20.7 points per game, which is similar to the projections from Justin Herbert and similar to projections from Pat Mahomes. And so basically, Justin Herbert's trading at 9,977, and Lamar Jackson's trading at 7,783, and they're both have the same projected points per game. They're both young. They both score a lot of points. That's what you're doing.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Right?
Is it because like there's like this belief that Patty Mahomes has this much further, like longer career? Like it's so crazy, but I see what you're saying. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's interesting. Does it?
Yeah,
Is there any factor of? Sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead.
Is there any injury, not projections, but say players had 3 or 4 injuries? Is that projected into this model?
Yeah. So I think injuries would be a part of it, and that the way that would work is that it would fit into maybe like a lower cluster. If that was a guy that
Like a Rashad Penny.
Because that value already gets baked in, though, doesn't it? Like what their price already gets baked in that way, correct?
So yeah, there's
That's
two
fair.
ways ways it's getting baked in: the price, the KTC, and then the points per game. So people are, when they project out points per game, they're taking into account the fact that this guy potentially gets hurt. And so they'll,
Or limited,
like you said, the human element, they'll lower that down a little bit because they know that guy gets hurt often.
Okay.
And then also, I may put him in a different cluster. And so there's kind of 3 ways they're doing it. Maybe that's counting the same thing 3 times, because you're taking into account 3 different ways. But that is baked in a little bit. Now, from a dynasty perspective, clearly there's some injuries that players have a tougher time coming back from. But I like to think of it from a longer term perspective and imagine that usually players, or a lot of times if they're young, players can get back to or close to where they were before. And so I like to try and keep them in similar areas until it's decided that injury is something that you can't come back from. And a lot of times that'll basically, such and such player gets injured and the market is completely out of them. It causes a dislocation in the market. People panic, sell. And that would be a time, from a dynasty perspective, if I really believed in the player and I think he could come back, that'd be a time that I'd be looking to buy on something. And I think it would show up in the PE model pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Mind
Rob.
if I hop in? While it's
Yeah.
on my mind, it just something popped into my mind. So for the players, just out of curiosity, if you have you thought about this at all? Just for an example, like Tyler Lockett. Okay, he's known to be very sporadic with his points. So like he'll put up 2, then he'll put up 20, then he'll put up 4 and 6 and 20. Is there any? I know it's so hard to even like project anything like that, but is there any sort of baked in I guess value or devalue based on the sporadic points that people put up, just like those certain players that seem to always kind of go up and down, up and down, up and down?
No, not really, other than where you put them in the clusters.
Okay. Just curious because
their average gets baked into the PPG, right?
Correct. So it would be like one week he's a 20 points per game guy, and the next week he's a 2 points per game guy, and it averages out to 11 points per game, and that's kind of how I would look at it. So like I'm thinking about this from a dynasty perspective, when we think a little bit longer term, it's full year type of returns, and maybe if you're from a dynasty perspective, maybe you're on 5-year cycles or however you do it. And that's how I'm thinking about it. If a player consistently scores 11 points per game for a season long average, some of those weeks he's winning my matchups, and some of those weeks he might be losing my matchups, but it should equal out over time.
Even out.
I think that gets into like sort of like consistency and stuff like that. And that, I think a lot of that has to do with maybe like, roster construction and how you play this particular year. And the model that I'm doing is more about like capturing inefficiencies in pricing and points. And so I'm not going to be able to tell you should play this guy this week. But I will say that I think Lockett is fairly cheap. You can get him fairly cheaply. I don't have him as top buy, but I do have some upside in what I think his KTC could be.
Okay.
The guy that's perennially undervalued for what he's able to do, and I think this year they got him at 12 points per game average, and he's got one of the lower PEs for wide receivers at 21 PE. So people just kind of like hate on him, even though he's actually puts up decent
Numbers.
points, I guess.
Yeah. I think this is just so cool. Like I am excited, and I know we're not done talking, but I am excited to see like if it ever is something that can be translated into redraft, because I think there is a path for it, but it's probably incredibly harder and a lot more variance. So it probably doesn't pay out the same way. I did want to go over your top sells here. Well, I had one question. I see AJ Dillon on this list. So there's some high hopes, especially from our group of guys here for AJ Dillon and redraft, and definitely dynasty. I think there's some love for him. So my question is, you're showing a negative 24 right now. Like you should be selling him. What's his current PE like valued at? Because we don't have access into that. So like, what are some of the players that are near his PE right now?
Yeah. So AJ Dillon, he's currently projected consensus projections for 11 points per game.
Okay.
His PE is at a 43.
That's pretty high.
His target PE I have in there is 32. That's kind of what his cluster is. If you're looking at KTC, his KTC is 4,700. He's going at where Nick Chubb is. He's above Derrick Henry, Travis Kelce, Deshaun Watson, Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Elijah Moore, All these
Those
guys.
guys are up there.
Aaron Jones, he's above Aaron Jones right now.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when this is a little bit confusing, so it's hard to separate the two. You know, when a lot of people talk about value, they're talking about where they can get him in a startup draft, where they can get him in a redraft. And a lot of times you're able to get AJ Dillon as like running back 24, 25, which might feel like pretty good, especially if you weren't drafting running backs early.
Yeah.
As a good chance as somebody that could break out. But when you go and look at KTC, which is like actual transactions, what people would then trade you for him, it's expensive. He's expensive to try and get. And so that's where I'm kind of everybody's kind of piled into this AJ Dillon's going to break out. And the way I see it is that AJ Dillon is still in a committee backfield. And there might be weeks where he's an RB1, and there might be weeks when he only puts up 11 points per game or less. And so, but he's being valued at the Derrick Henry level, which is basically, you know, he owns the backfield. He puts up like way more points per game. I mean, we're talking about, if we're talking about redraft, you know, that's it. It doesn't quite make sense to me from that perspective.
Yeah.
And I completely understand. I like AJ Dillon too. I think he's awesome. I think even next year, I don't know what happens with Aaron Jones and all that, but I think it's possible that at some point AJ Dillon puts up a season where he's an RB1. But right now, based on what projections are, which is 11 points per game, and you know, him having Aaron Jones there, which kind of sort of sharing the workload.
Yeah.
If you put in my model, if you say, hey, 11 points per game, that's wrong. It should be, let's say, 15 points per game, right?
Mm-hmm.
It bumps him up a ton, probably.
His 15 points per game changes his PE to about a 32. He actually has, it's quite close. It's a zero upside or downside. So then he would be exactly valued how he should be. So if basically what I'm trying to say is the market is projecting or telling me that it thinks that AJ Dillon's going to get 15 points per game, and consensus right now is telling me that that all the experts that pore over these things, that talk to the teams that are pretty good at this stuff, tell me 11 points per game. So that's kind of the difference there. And if he gets 15 points per game, he's exactly valued where he should be. So there's like very little, I guess he could go up if he's really putting up RB1 points and he gets to, instead of 15 points per game, he gets
20.
into like the, 17, 18 points per game range. Then I'm talking about moving clusters here to, what are the higher end clusters. And then I'd give him a higher PE multiple. So there might be some more upside, but what I would be talking about is risk reward, right? So if he stays in the situation where he's sharing the workload with Aaron Jones and he puts up 15 points per game, then he's trading where he should trade already. So there's no upside to it. And if he continues to be in a committee, last year he put up his points per game was 11 points per game, and the experts have him at 11 points per game again this year. And I see downside. So it's sort of the asymmetrical risk reward here. If he hits and he gets the 15 points per game, then doesn't look like there's too much upside left. The market seems to be already pricing that in. And if he continues on the way he did last year, then there's just downside. It's, could be quite a bit of downside. So that's kind of what I'm thinking there.
It would also be interesting for whenever you're creating this for public access, if you ever do, of course, to allow a spot. Like if somebody's like, well, I want to see if I believe he gets 15 points per game, what would that put him at? And where's that put him at value wise? Because then it's like, I think it helps I guess it'll only help you in the sell category though, because you're not going to want to do that with buys unless you wanted to go lower with buy. And I think that maybe I'm overcomplicating that then.
Yeah, so the tool that would be pretty cool. What I would want to do, or I think what you're getting at, is letting everybody customize what they think the fundamental value should be based on their own inputs. And I think that would be cool. It might take some time to create, but that happens in the stock market. You have a whole bunch of experts out there trying to come up with what
Price
they
targets.
think the fundamental value of a company is, and or get a price target. And there's a lot of people that are very smart, all doing it at the same time, and none of them come up with the same value.
Yeah,
And that's sort of how you're thinking about, the players as the football players as themselves, is just like there's a lot of
is this a
people
buy for me?
doing the same thing. There's
Yeah.
some people that are going to be more right on than other people. What I'm doing is I'm taking all of those people's expectations and using just the consensus of it. I'm not saying one person is right or one person is wrong. I'm just taking the consensus.
Yeah, no, and I
Which
think that's
again is-
awesome.
It's hard to separate the two.
Yeah.
It really is. It's hard to say, I don't care what I think. This is what it is.
So I had this image. He sent me these, and sorry, Jay, I didn't read the text because I did have these images ready before he sent them today from that thread, but I was just kind of grabbing and putting up. So I had this without context, and I was like, what the heck is this image? And it was like an Excel sheet, color coded, sell, buy. Like, I'm like, well, I for whatever reason, I'm struggling this. What are these? I love to.
This is what I'd like to talk about, because this is the actual value I'm adding to your process.
Yeah. And
so
like now I see the painful one on 630 with Gronk. I would be so pissed right now. But in hindsight, it was probably cheap as hell. Maybe?
So the bottom right-hand corner is what I've done for people. If you did my recommendation on the day I told you to do it, that's how much KTC I've added to your portfolio. The goal here is collecting KTC, adding as much KTC as possible. So let's take the first one, for example.
That's so interesting.
I put a sell on Tyreek Hill on February 2nd. That's the date added to the trade. So I put a sell on Tyreek Hill on February 2nd. When I put that sell on there, his KTC was about 6,000. And I put a target price out there of 50.45. And then on May 30th, I closed out that trade. I said, all right, Tyreek Hill is no longer a sell. That's the first column, May 30th, the end of June. And on that day, his date closed KTC was 5,054. So almost right on what I thought it would be. And so from February to May, his KTC went from 6,000 to 5,000 for a total performance of minus 15%. So in that performance column, all the green guys are good guys and all the red guys are bad guys. And then the final column is how much KTC that particular trade added. If you made those sort of the sell on the day that I told you to sell, and you bought them back or upgraded them to hold on the day I told you to, or on the day I told you no longer was a sell, that would be the KTC I added for that one particular trade. And so these are all the trades that I've made. There's been definitely some lessons learned along the way, and some of them, like Gronk, that you'll just have those where, I thought the upside was a double or to zero. So it was like this very risk reward situation. I made a guess, and I guessed wrong, but it only cost me 658 KTC. There's been lots of trades where I've made a lot more than that. And then if you total all of these trades up at the bottom, that 1446, that's what I've added in value since I started making recommendations.
This is like this is how, and I didn't realize it, so I'm glad you explained it and like just explained all of the columns and everything here. This is the most easiest to like quickly see and understand here, because it's literally you're adding KTC using your PE tool, but it's like this. There's actual say monetary, but that's how it feels. Like you're actually adding this amount from looking at them being overpriced or underpriced according to your PE, which is
Yeah.
fun. Awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I think part of my series, I mean, I talked about at the very beginning, I said, part of it is valuation is strategy. The other part is accountability. It's the part that frustrated me most and maybe why I actually started doing some of this stuff. But, I'd basically be scrolling through Twitter, looking at what the experts were saying, and I'd see, the expert buy this guy, and he'd do it 30 times, and then later in the season, he'd screenshot them and throw them up there, and say, "Look, hey, look, I told you to buy this guy. Now he's doing well." It didn't really like you don't have no idea what the hit rate is. You have no idea like, um, you know, between one analyst versus the other, who's giving the best advice.
Yeah.
So this, I think, is a way to hold people accountable. If not only are you giving a recommendation, you're also telling them like how much conviction you have based on how much upside is there or downside is there. And you're telling them when to move in and when to move out. And then you actually have a number that you're able to say, like, this is how much value I was able to add, not like just some sort of abstract, like, yeah, you
He's
should
doing
buy this
good.
guy.
Yeah.
But who knows when you said buy and who knows when you soured up on him. But I guess that gets into like just identifying good players or not. And some people, that's what they do. And so I wanted to make it easier, or maybe try to at least go out and try and normalize how people give recommendations. It doesn't necessarily have to be like KTC based. But I want to have established track records for players, so the consumers of the content, the consumers of the information, know, who are the guys that I should listen to, who are the guys that think similar to me, and what have they done? What is their track record? Is it any good? And so that's kind of the process there.
Yeah, this looks like a stock spreadsheet that you'd be like watching your portfolio with. It's great. And like, I there was one other question I had before we kind of wrap things up here is like, is there a way to make this, I guess when you're looking at this, what are you looking at? Like a standard PPR league, one QB, or is there any, like, how I guess, how does that look? Because like, if it was super flex or 2 QB, I think it changes things, no? Or does it remain the same?
Yeah, so I think believe the way KTC set up is, I think it's PPR and Superflex. So that's
So it's
why
all
guys,
assuming super flex then.
that's why guys like Pat Mahomes and Josh Allen trade at the highest prices. If it was
That makes
not
sense.
a super flex, then those guys would be much lower down in terms of the pricing scheme. So I think largely fantasy now, there's still like, a lot of fantasy leagues that don't do super flex, but I think we're starting to move into the direction between, the different charity bowls and stuff like that, where super flex is kind of becoming more of the standard, the way more people think about Dynasty,
Definitely Dynasty, yeah.
and C2C or Devi or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the right way to look at it. But if you were trying to use this information to do a redraft one
Or
QB
one,
league,
it'd probably be different.
it'd be less valuable, I think.
Mhm. No, I think it would have to, because then your quarterbacks are all ranked higher, and like you're not going to only use this to trade wide receiver to wide receiver. You're going to look at ways of trading this where you can kind of benefit positionally as well. So
are there other websites that have a value based on a value based for trading?
Oh yeah, there's tons of different trade calculators out there. I think Dynasty Nerds even has their own, where they assign a dollar price to each of the guys.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, there's tons out there. I think like something that's interesting is, we talked about Prediction Strike or Mojo or something like that. That could be the next evolution, moving from a KTC base price to like a Mojo base price once and
Yeah.
if those types of things take off. I've looked at their platform and it looks pretty cool.
I can't even do it, and I have it downloaded on my phone.
Yeah.
I think I do too, Rob.
Yeah, I watch
Just
it.
waiting for the day.
Waiting for the day, baby.
Yeah, prediction strike is on mine.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, like when you're trading, like you're sticking to KTC. So I'm not like advocating that you when you sell somebody, you're selling for peanuts on the dollar. When you look at my top sells list, I'm asking you to sell it at what the KTC price is, not just offload guys for nothing because they're on your top sell list. If you're not getting what is the equivalent price of that guy that you're trying to sell, then it's not a sell, it's a hold. And then the other aspect is I get this question a lot is like, okay, so how do I use this when I'm drafting? How do I use this in a startup draft?
You don't, right? Oh, startup draft. Oh.
There's different ways I've thought about this. But for the most part, I would advocate drafting the highest KTC player available. And if you're, here's the thing. I would not be opposed to drafting top sells, especially if you're into trading in a dynasty mode, because those are the guys that I think are overvalued. And you're getting them at their KTC price because you're drafting them where KTC says. And then you can then trade that overvalued guy for an undervalued guy plus more. Presumably you'd be getting somewhat similar points per game, but you'd be adding draft picks or other players that you like or prefer. So I wouldn't necessarily say like when you're drafting, my top sells is a like top avoids list, because that's definitely not the case. I might actually be seeking out, if I'm into trading, I might actually be seeking out some of those top sells as guys I want to add on my team, and then I go and take advantage of sort of their overvaluedness and collect some extra with it.
Yeah, that and you would have to act fast if somebody was going to do that, because right now we're not. I mean, I'm considering it's 8/31. We're about a week out. So like, say this was next year, and you did this in your startup in June, I would think you'd want to get those top sells sold and traded before the start of the season. I would think, right? Because that's the catalyst that you spoke about earlier. That's outside of any abnormalities, like who knows, injury, suspension, whatever may come up. But like at latest, you need to get those guys sold by the start of the season. That is such a unique approach to a startup too, is like, let me draft 5 guys that are sells and I'm just going to get my assets doubled up right away, or plus 25% right away. And then to buy the low guys because they're just being undervalued and still getting your points per game.
Yeah. So like my example that I use is AJ Dillon versus Derrick Henry. Like back in May, you could sell AJ Dillon for Derrick Henry plus a early second or something like that. I think it might have even been more than that.
Wow.
Just because Derrick Henry got injured, but like from a dynasty perspective, yeah, you're giving up all the potential for AJ Dillon to become our RB1, but you're also getting another shot at another player with the second. Plus, you're getting Derrick Henry that'll help you win now by a lot. So Derrick Henry puts up like 19, 20 points per game, and AJ Dillon's projected at 11 points per game. So, that's, you could do sort of that type of trading and make it make sense. And, with that early second, you could have gotten a George Pickens. You could have gotten, I don't know who else are some of the guys that have kind of shot up. Brian Robinson. You
yeah.
could have gotten a Pacheco. You could have gotten a
Tolbert.
Damian Pierce.
Damian
Those types of
Pierce.
guys.
That's Robbie's favorite. Don't get him started. He's probably. I'm surprised he didn't pop up on your top sells list yet. I'm sure it's happening soon.
Yeah,
His age is keeping him lower. Rob, you're safe right now.
I wouldn't trade him for the world.
No, you wouldn't.
Not for
You
a
would
pot of
trade the
gold.
world for him, though.
Oh, you can have Patty Mahomes. You can have.
Rob has his brother has him in one of our dynasty leagues, and I try to message him. I don't have his brother's number. I just try to put it in sleeper like your brother will offer everything for him. Take
I would.
advantage of this.
Yeah, you could definitely bend me over a barrel.
So that makes sense from a redraft perspective. I think a guy like Pierce could be do well.
No, he
I
has.
think-
This is dynasty
it's
that
his
we're talking
dynasty.
about, though. What is his value currently in dynasty? Is it jumped?
So the way I think about rookies when they come in, I do a lot of Devi work, and I do rankings on Dynasty Nerds for rookies. The way that I do it is sort of like an analytical model where you kind of meet different thresholds and stuff like that. One of the thresholds that I have the thresholds are essentially production, athleticism, and one of them is draft capital. And for running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, I generally try to stick to guys that were drafted in the 3rd round or earlier. If you're a guy that's drafted later, clearly there's going to be situations where you're going to get play. And Pierce is a perfect example of that. But from a prospect perspective, you can make exceptions, but generally there's not very good hit rates for guys that are after the 3rd round.
I don't want
Sometimes
to
they
hear it,
do.
Mario. Keep your
So
mouth shut.
the concern that I would have is that, it's kind of like the James Robinson theory, which is like the main guy goes down. This guy, he comes in, he gets the opportunity, he does well, but then he gets replaced by somebody that like a Travis Etienne, somebody that comes in with 1st round draft capital that is clearly a better prospect. And so that's how I'd kind of think about it. Hit rates after the 3rd round are tough. Now that being said, there's outliers. Sometimes these guys, sometimes you're in the right confluence of events and stuff, and it all works
Miracles.
out.
What he's describing is miracles. No, I'm just kidding.
Don't want to
What
hear
I've-
it.
Not quite that.
What I've heard is that generally, like, Florida doesn't use their backs to their fullest potential. So like the production thresholds that he maybe didn't meet in college,
That's what I'm saying.
weren't as important. But
Which hurt his
generally
draft capital.
when you make exceptions like that, a lot of times you can get yourself in trouble. And so I like to play the odds, the numbers. And
I get it.
If I had drafted Damian Pierce, I'd be really looking to sell. If you can get a 2023 first, I'd smash that.
Oh, Robbie would probably send 2.
Smash.
Robbie is all in, Jay. And I had to post this, and he just ignored. He said,
All right,
okay.
let's pump the brakes here. Okay. He's ranked as
all
my
in.
RB22 for the year.
Oh, he
for this
was
upcoming
20 at
season.
one point.
Maybe
And
he's
that was
20.
before Mac.
This was before Mac.
Yeah.
So,
That was
and I'm
be-
not
I mean, that
moving
was
him
in, that was in June
yeah.
when you put him
I've
at
been
20.
on him since the beginning. Watch the tape. He's a good player, man.
There's
He's
not
the
much
guy.
tape.
He's the
What
guy.
is there? 100 carries a year.
Until Bijan comes next year and they draft him. And then Pierce becomes
Let me
Michael
just-
Carter 2021.
This was Casario's. This is Casario's first draft. This is who he went with. I'm fine with it. I think this is
Went
Casario's
in
dude.
what? The
What
fourth
round?
round?
what round?
In the
I think it was
fourth.
4th.
Yeah.
Was it 4th? I thought it was
Mhm.
later than that.
They didn't have a first
It
though either.
may have been 5th.
So it was his like 2nd or 3rd pick. I don't know if he traded up for him or not, to be totally honest with you. But regardless, it's a draft pick from a new GM. I don't think they're going to move on too quickly from him. Could something happen? Sure, maybe. But if he proves that he's a good running back this season, I don't see any reason why they would draft somebody.
He was picked the 4th round, pick 107.
I'm fine with it. I'm cool with it.
I did have a cool stat while we're on here, even though we've just completely derailed here.
We did.
41 day 3 or undrafted rookie RB seasons where the RB has had more than 100 total touches. That's catches and rushes. Only 7 of these RBs in their rookie seasons finished in the top as a top 24.
And he's going to be number 2.
6 of the 7 were not drafted in fantasy leagues. So they had an undrafted ADP for their respective rookie season. So if that's showing you how common it is for Dameon Pierce's to come along, because he's currently being drafted, he's probably getting closer to this 5th, 6th round price by weekend, I would guess.
I cannot wait to tap dance at the end of the season all over you. I can't wait.
I'd love to see it.
That's not the tap dance though, man. If he performs well this year, he should perform well. He's getting the opportunity and he looks pretty good. It's how long do you get him for?
Next year.
Yeah. Is he going to be around next year? Is he going to be the best back on the Texans next year?
When he's the guy, he's going to be the guy for the next 10 years, and I'm going to be dancing around.
Robbie, come on. This is like you saying Ryan Griffin was going to have 6 TDs.
I still think it's possible.
Put this out of here.
Put this in the calendar. If 5 years from now,
if Dameon Pierce is still in the league,
Dameon Pierce is
cake money.
The number 1 running back on the Houston Texans. I'll give you a case of whatever beer you want.
Oh yeah, Robbie, write it down.
That's fine.
Write it down.
Put it in the bets, Mario.
Robbie's gonna want
bets. I'm writing it down.
His expensive ass seltzers.
I like my high noons.
Awesome, Jay. Man, that was some good stuff. It is like, it's funny having this conversation because like you've explained it to me through text, you've explained it through messages, but it is a very different way of thinking about fantasy football. It's not only we're giving a different value to players, like a different sort of metric, but it's even like how you're looking at them, right? When we talked about how you're looking at them as X's and O's rather than Michael Gallup and AJ Dillon or something like that, which is good for like everything that you want to build a dynasty winning roster. And not me. I just like to, just watch my dynasty team burn because I like players. So I look at the names. No, but I do appreciate you coming on today and explaining that. And I'm excited to see it kind of evolve and hopefully one day it's out to where we can play around with it a little bit more. I'm just excited to see what you got for that and any more articles related on it.
Hey, yeah, I appreciate that. I got a couple things, got new ideas coming all the time. Working through some new stuff as well. Maybe a price to sales ratio instead of just a PE, two different kinds of ratios. Really appreciate you having me on the show. Just trying to get this concept out there and get out to people. If anybody's interested, please follow me on Twitter. It's @_Jason Stein. And you can find all my work on the Dynasty Nerds. It's the articles are not behind a paywall. You can go and read them for free. It's the Intelligent Fantasy Football Investor series on Dynasty Nerds.
Yes, I have his name is tagged in the tweet. So you could just click on his name. It'll take you right there to hit the follow. In certain websites, I think it's Facebook and maybe YouTube or Twitch. It's definitely not Twitter. I put in your link for your articles. I will post it. I will post it on Twitter below in a comment under this video. So definitely go check it out. Check out his, follow him. He'll be letting us know if he's going to come out with these video series soon. Video series.
Yeah.
That'll be fun.
But yeah, man. Yeah, we appreciate you hopping on, and I'm glad we got you on here finally. We got to meet you. This has been a great off season. We'll have to get you back on to see any sort of updates. Like, hey, this is what we talked about in August. Look at this price range, and it would be really interesting. The Dave Pierce one, yeah. That's what all we'll talk about. Damian Pierce's PE.
Yeah, I'd love to come on, guys. This has been a good opportunity for me. I really enjoy hanging with you guys. So yeah, have me on anytime.
Yeah, when
Awesome, brother.
same back. Like if you ever want to hop on and you'd be like, dude, I'm bored. Like let me hop on and we just talk football, do it to it, or Dynasty. We don't have many Dynasty shows, so maybe we need to utilize you a lot more because get that audience going. We do Dynasty, we talk about it, we kind of refer to it, never necessarily. This has been a good main Dynasty episode for us, so we appreciate it.
For sure.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks, dude. Let me get this outro rolling so it can cut me off. Very
Cut 'em off.
non-professional. Got to kind of talk about it.
About
But
damn
if you're
time.
not
Cut his ass
already, check us out on Twitter at DadBodFS, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, DadBod Fantasy Squad, and we'll be posting this on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast. What's the last one?
You're cutting out, Mario, per usual. Go ahead, redo it. Go, you got this.
Is it back? Am I
You're
back?
You're back.
Apple Podcasts,
It's when it kicks
Spotify,
in.
Google Podcasts. What else, Rob?
All the major streaming platforms.
Did they catch us? I don't know what I can hear. Like
Twitter,
DadBod Fantasy Squad. Check us
YouTube,
out.
all the stuff.
For myself, Rob, Jay, peace. That was messy.